You know when you experience something new and you make it your entire personality because you like it so much? For the first time in probably 25 years, I read a book, and then another, and then another. And today I would like to talk about my experience not only reading those books, but my experience reading a book for essentially the first time in my life, in excruciating detail. But much like every recipe you have ever looked up online, I would like to provide some context. I have not willingly read a book since I had read the first Harry Potter book way back in, what was it, fourth grade or whatever. Due to my looking like Harry Potter in high school, I did not make it very far into that franchise. Feel free to extrapolate from there. As a result, reading never really sunk its grip into me, and I instead opted for video games as my main entertainment medium of choice. Never reading anything of my own volition since elementary school, since those Harry Potter books. And to clarify, I do mean books. I read plenty of online articles about this and that and whatever, but not books. My wife Danielle, on the other hand, basically only reads books. She inhales books. I think she read over like 50 books last year. What? Oh, sorry, 89 books. I couldn't name 8 books, and I'm currently in a room surrounded by 100 books. And for a while, she begged me to read her favorite book, Gideon the Ninth by Tamsyn Muir. The furthest I got on my first attempt was 5 pages in. That was probably 3 years ago. Not because I didn't like it. I am just not a big reader. And I tried again to try to surprise Danielle. And now I look like this. So it's safe to assume that I did it. And I took the audiobook route and I listened to the book. I did not physically read the book, but I listened to the book. I don't know if there are book purists out there on the level of, the book was better than the movie. People, when it comes to audiobooks versus paper books, who up until this video I have found at best annoying and at worst insufferable. But I am sure that reviewing a book that you have only listened to versus only physically read does have its differences. I listened to all of the books in the series, all 50 to 60 hours worth of listening, doing as little as 30 minutes to as much as 90 minutes in a day. I struggle with staying locked in when physically reading a book, and I am much more of a visual media enjoyer, and listening was a mix of the two and was probably the only way that I was going to get through all of it. Also, I don't know how people do book commentary or like reviews or reactions. Do you do something for only the people who have read the book? Do you explain the book for people who will never read it but are maybe still interested in what you have to say? Do those people even exist? I have no idea, but I'm going to do this the way that I want to do it. So I'm going to explain what's happening for those who have not read the books to keep you vaguely clued in. But I will say that I think this video will be enjoyed the most by people who have read all 3 books, at least the first book, at least the first one, and are looking to watch someone react to these books for the very first time. This is your first spoiler warning. I will be spoiling things in these books. The plot, characters, you name it. I will be talking about those things in detail. What really helped me throughout this entire series was the narrator, Moira Quirk. As someone who does not really read at all, matching dialogue to characters was like kind of a difficult thing for me to follow because everyone's voice is the same. It's just words on a book. I was about to say words on a screen. I had difficulty visualizing scenes in my head while trying to read, and then I often found myself zoning out, only then to have to like reread the page, and then I would zone out again, and then I would just kind of give up because I couldn't stay locked in. But having someone narrate for you immersed me into the experience way more than I could ever do on my own. I could visualize the characters talking. I could visualize their movement, their everything. I could visualize the scene way more in my head, going as far as pantomiming the characters and what I imagined their facial and bodily expressions would be. Although sometimes I would go too far and I would just be reacting to the tone of their voice and not actually listening, smashing the 30-second rewind like one might consider smashing the like button when confronted by a YouTuber with an unhuman amount of energy. Without Moira's amazing narration work, her character voices, you would not be listening to the ramblings of a madman dressed as a teenage girl necromancer. I will preface this by saying that a few years ago, Danielle had explained to me, as if she were a 5-year-old telling a story to an adult, the gist of some characters, their relationships, among other things, like the relationship between a necromancer and a cavalier. There was also a character named Gideon, which I kind of gathered because that's the name of the book. A character named Harrow, that's me. And a third character that I'm going to talk about later, who first appears in the second book. So I had a little bit of context to what was going on before I started, but not that much. Let's begin with Gideon the Ninth. In the myriadic year of our Lord, the 10,000th year of the King Undying, the kindly Prince of Death, Gideon Nav packed her sword, her shoes, and her dirty magazines, and she escaped from the house of the Ninth. Okay, so looks like we're trying to get the hell out of here. First of all, the cover of the book says, lesbian necromancers explore a haunted goth palace in space. And while this is indeed true, that statement could imply to some that there is a lot of romance or relationships or even sex in these books. There is a character that Gideon gets somewhat infatuated with for a good chunk of the book, as do I, thanks to Moira's great voice acting. But it doesn't really go that far at all. I don't even know if I would call it a relationship. I don't think this tagline really encapsulates the experience very well. Yes, most of those things are true. There are lesbians and there are necromancers and they do be in space and they do be exploring a haunted goth palace, but it doesn't really feel accurate to what the book actually is. Second, I don't know if all books are written like this, but I thought the pace in Gideon was really nice. In contrast, there are some chapters in future books where it feels like almost nothing happens at all. But in Gideon the Ninth, after every chapter, at the start anyway, I could, 1, very easily describe the events of the chapter, and more importantly to me, 2, how it progressed the plot along. Sure, there's some setup moments in there. Maybe there's a couple of pages that go a bit into describing what a room or a building looks like or something like that. But even at the beginning, I could formulate not only an overarching direction of the whole story, but then the subplots or the more immediate directions we were headed in. I could go back and I could say, this is what happened in chapter 1, and this is what happened in chapter 2 and chapter 3, and how it contributes to the immediate plot and the overall plot. This is a huge win for me personally, as even I could remember my struggles as a child, making sure I stayed locked in on what was happening in the book. Anyway, Gideon Nav is some sort of a prisoner, or as I was corrected later, indentured servant of the Ninth House. The Ninth House seems to have one specific purpose: to protect the Locked Tomb. And that's the name of the book series, the Locked Tomb. Series, I guess, which is located on said planet. What's in the Locked Tomb? I don't know. Do you ever find out? You do indeed. Do you find out in this book? Technically yes, but really no. The Ninth House is a dreary, dark place with tons of religious overtones, but it feels like it might as well be a giant dungeon. And it's also filled with bones. Bones, I got bones everywhere. The Ninth House is all about bones and bone magic and bone this and bone that. Grow up. They have face paint that they use to paint different kinds of skulls on their faces. It's all bones. There's a lot of the actual necromancer stuff that I will not even be able to scratch the surface of because we would be here all friggin' day. But it tends to come down to each house being able to use their specific style of necromancy or whatever specialization they have for like whatever the things they do on their house or in their house. On their house, it's a planet. The author does set up some rules about necromancy. Terminology like thanergy and thalergy are thrown into the mix basically everywhere. But general rules are established and sussed out as the book goes on as to what is and is not possible in this world. All that being said, I love the necromancy stuff. I love the sword fighting. It adds so much extra flavor to the entire experience. Although when they start to get really in the weeds about, some of the necromancer stuff, like someone's reading from an advanced textbook, my eyes can start to glaze over. Like I'm pretty surface level with it. So everyone hates Gideon, and Gideon pretty much hates everybody else. On the other hand, I like Gideon a lot. And I think that's because I can relate with her sense of humor. I wouldn't necessarily call her completely deadpan, but she is incredibly sarcastic, she is crude, and just really likes to get to the point. She doesn't have time for this frou-frou storytelling or over-explanation or speaking in mysteries or like whatever's going on. She just wants to know what's happening in plain terms, and I can absolutely relate to that. There's a few times in the book where something is being actively over-explained, and she says the equivalent of, "In English, please," which I really appreciated, because there were some times where I'm just like, what are they talking about? She wears aviator sunglasses. Where she found them is anybody's guess, as she reads porno mags as much as one would be reading a porno mag. That's Gideon. And after reading the next two books, something that I caught on to on my second listen was that this first book also feels written as if Gideon had written the book, which just adds even more to the entire experience. It took me way too long to appreciate Gideon, both the character and the book, and that's because when I was listening to the first book, the first time around anyway, I wasn't initially there for the characters and the story. I was there because I knew it would make my wife happy, and to just spit back information to her like I was taking an exam before I immediately dumped all knowledge of it once I got my grade. So I wasn't expecting to get so attached. Now that I've listened to all three currently available books, I am actively listening to all of them over again, and I am loving it even more than I did the first time, to the point where it really feels like the second listen is my first true read through or listen of the book. On first read, I only locked in maybe about a dozen chapters or so into the book, and then I really locked in at a certain point in Act, I want to say 4. The book starts with Gideon attempting her escape after weeks of planning from Drearbur, which is the big hole in the planet where everybody lives, and is also some kind of cathedral type place, I think. The point is, it's basically the only place where anything actually happens in the ninth house and or this planet. I also say lives, but again, Gideon's like some sort of servant, indentured servant, something like that, prisoner, whatever she is. She is eventually caught by 3 characters of the ninth house. First is Crux, who is just some sort of miserable, awful being who was made to look after her. Captain Iglamine, a slightly less miserable ninth house teacher swordswoman who is sympathetic to Gideon and who I actually like a fair amount as well. And finally, harrow, aka the Reverend Daughter. Harrow is a character that took me a bit to find palatable at first. Her hatred of Gideon is completely unexplained and goes completely unexplained for a while. And at first, I did not like Harrow because she just hated for what felt like no reason other than I'm important and you're not and you suck and you're beneath me, which just kind of felt one-dimensional. I was also very much rooting for Gideon initially, so I was just like, F this bitch, man, like stop hurting my Gideon. Now, I knew that they would eventually be working together, as my wife had explained said relationship that a necromancer and a cavalier have, which we come to learn that Harrow is a necromancer and Gideon will eventually become a cavalier. But how that came to be, I had no idea. And given the start of this book, where these two individuals hate each other, I did wonder how this would get off the ground, considering that I thought a necromancer, Harrow, and a cavalier, Gideon, should have a good relationship, or at least like a neutral one. On second read, I love Harrow now. I love Harrow. The way her and Gideon banter is some of my favorite stuff in all of the books. But I also feel like this is the most alive she really feels in all three of the books. I missed all this stuff the first time through, though. She's so deliciously evil at the start. And now that I'm beyond my first read, I can enjoy it way more knowing what happens later. A cavalier, for those watching this with no plans to read or listen to the book, even though I do really think you should, is essentially the guardian to the necromancer's summoner, to put it in Final Fantasy X terms that I know everyone is very well acquainted with. Necromancers are the brains, cavaliers are the brawn to protect them, with cavaliers training specifically with a rapier for reasons I come to learn much, much later. So Gideon gets baited into a fight with Harrow after she makes a bet with Gideon. Beat her in a fight and you get to go free. Lose to her and she has to stay for a meeting and then she can go free. And Harrow wins because she knew that Gideon was plotting, and I'm crushed for Gideon. She is literally mere moments away from escape. This whole book, this whole sequence does not exist if she just says no to the fight, or if she wins, or like whatever. I was not expecting that reaction out of myself this early, as I am a man made completely of stone, with the emotional bandwidth, the thickness of a human hair. I am a mere 2 chapters in, and I'm already experiencing some kind of feelings for a character, which is kind of cool because I wasn't really expecting to get attached like at all. I'm also trying so unbelievably hard to not let my second listen of the book interfere with my notes from my first listening, although it is so hard to stop myself from gushing about my second listen. Like, I love it that much more. Anyway, Gideon goes to the meeting, and we get something that I feel is missing in parts of the second and third books: a sense of direction. In chapter 1, it is given to you in the first sentence: escape. Escape this place. We have now shifted course. We're now on the we're going to Canaan House because the Emperor has invited Harrow to become a lictor course. Like I mentioned earlier, in this first book, it always felt like I knew some general direction that we were headed in. I like direction. I don't want to say like. I need direction. Every few chapters gives you a new direction, a new plot point to focus on, an immediate subject on top of the greater plot line, which in this book is become a lictor. It helps me lock in as to what might and might not be important. I hate feeling aimless. I hate feeling like I don't know what's happening. We'll talk about this more in Book 2 and Book 3. What is a lictor, you might be asking? It's like a giga necromancer, but it's unknown how to become one, so you go to Canaan House to figure that out. Originally, it was supposed to be Harrow and someone else going to Canaan House, which doesn't happen because reasons. So now Gideon must go instead. This is also, I think, like the first time in 10,000 years or something like that there's going to be a new wave of lictors. So, like, nice timing, I guess. Here, it is revealed that Harrow has yet again tricked Gideon into a situation, as Gideon's place on the shuttle is stolen, with it leaving immediately after this meeting happens. And god damn, could I feel this moment hitting so hard for Gideon. My mind's eye performing a cinematic focus pull on her as she says, "What about the shuttle?" You can feel it in the narration. You can feel her sarcastic, tough facade completely shatter here like a baseball being thrown through a window. And we're barely in Act 1. She'd never want Harrow to know that she actually won, or that Gideon was even bothered by her, and it's so easy to pick up on this from only a couple of chapters. And when she asks Harrow why she did all this, like, why stop her from leaving? Why keep torturing her like this? Harrow returns a line that Gideon fed her not less than an hour ago. Because I completely fucking hate you. No offense. Which again was something that I had missed the first time around. So, either Gideon did something horrible, which I didn't really feel like she did or was even capable of, or Harrow is just the cruelest bitch of all time. Which, to be fair, if she's not, she's certainly close to the top of the list. Despite Gideon's despair from all of this, I love the banter that they have together, basically wishing the worst on each other the entire time, but I resonate very heavily with sarcastic banter. Their conversations are some of the best parts of the book, including a sequence we'll get to later, which is still my favorite moment in all 3 books. What I've appreciated so far about this experience, again, is that it has been relatively easy to follow. The plot isn't too convoluted. We have direction. I have figured out some characters and what they're like. I go back to read a chapter summary on Reddit when I'm done to make sure that I'm following along correctly, and I am. So that's good. Confidence is high. I am understanding what is happening in a book instead of questioning every single line. Gideon trains to become a cavalier as much as one can in 3 months versus the 7 or so years normally expected, and boom, we're in Canaan House. There are a ton of other characters from basically all the different houses, specifically 15 others, plus a man simply named Teacher, who essentially runs Canaan House. All Teacher does is tell people about the building because he has no idea about what necromancers need to actually do in order to become lictors. Or so it seems. On second read, a half-heard conversation becomes a lot more interesting as Teacher hits us with I missed the part where that's my problem, when a discussion is had about one of the houses. And while I could somewhat follow along with the general plot and some general things happening, things were going to get much, much more confusing for me to follow. Houses 2 through 9 have arrived. House number 1, I assumed, is the house of the Emperor, which it is. I know Gideon, and I know Harrow. And now we have 15 other characters instantly dropped on us, all with tons of different voices. All of the names feel like they're 8 syllables long, and I don't lock into the fact that you can very easily tell who is who, besides the voices, at least necromancer-wise, until chapter 20-something. 9 houses. What's the third house necromancer's last name? It's Tridentarius. Tri. 3. What's the 7th house? Septimus. Sept. 7. 8th house? Octochizaron. Oct. 8. I felt like a genius when I figured it out, and then as stupid as Ortis is pathetic when I realized it was staring me in the face the entire time. Yeah, I know that they tell you all the names at the front of the book. I am listening to the audiobook, okay? This is the only time where I wish I had a physical copy on me because I could just flip to the start and get some names instead of just being well, guess I'll just wing it. Then, while editing this video, or the script rather, my wife told me that the last names of the Cavaliers are actually giveaways to what house they belong to. It's just that their names are more subtle. I thought they were just random names. They're not. Nabirius Turn. Turn is a set of 3. Ebdema is another word for 7 in Latin. So F me, I guess. Anyway, 15 characters was too much for my brain to handle. The book hops from one group to another, and sure, I get some kind of vague sense of what is being discussed, but trying to lock in on who is actually speaking and why it's important to what's happening is near impossible without hitting the 30-second rewind every other paragraph. This was my biggest, here we go, this is why I don't read moment. So much going on, so many characters. Do I even know what's happening? If I zone out for a second, will I have missed a huge plot point? What's not helping is that it feels like Gideon can be as clueless as I am, but that does at least make some amount of sense given the plot. She doesn't know what the hell's going on either. These chapters have been so simple to follow thus far, but at this point, could I go back into a chapter and tell you definitively what happened or like who said what? Only the bare basics, at least around Act 3 anyway. And I started to get really discouraged here because I was kind of starting to enjoy myself, even though I was still of that, this is for the exam mindset. Despite the very dreary circumstances, I thought this world was wonderful. I was immersed. I had visualized all different parts of Canaan House in my own head canon, but now it felt like everything that I feared about reading a book was hitting me directly in the face. I couldn't follow everything. I couldn't follow who was talking. What does this all actually mean? And I was really about ready to just give up and throw in the towel, which sucked because I was also starting to make a routine out of it. I started going on 45-minute walks at night, and I waited until night because it fit the aesthetic. I am not reading a book about a necromancer who does bone magic on a dark planet in a dark cathedral at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday. For the two characters that I can actually follow, at this point in the book, Harrow tells Gideon to never follow her and never say anything or do anything, and just keep yourself isolated until further notice. So she does not do that, instead wandering the halls of Canaan House. She gets into all kinds of situations, like duels with some other cavaliers. She has someone be nice to her, who I will talk about in a second. She has someone be really nice to her, who I am not sure if I will ever talk about, despite their importance. So if I don't do it now, I never will. So let's do it right now. Dulcinea Septimus is that person, and from the beginning, her and Gideon form a relationship. What kind of relationship? I'm not too sure. But there's a lot of flirting from Dulcinea, who, by the way, is basically on the verge of death from the moment she arrived due to some kind of illness. I don't know if they really know what it is. I'm incredibly suspicious of this after their second or third time meeting. I have a feeling something is up here, but I don't know what. And unfortunately, the theory of this bitch is sick all the time tends to not really hold up in court. I really enjoy their interactions, though, as, it was like a side of Gideon that I feel like she herself never got to experience for any part of her life. Being desired, or at the very least, having someone be genuinely nice to her, which for how old Gideon is, 18, I think, I could absolutely relate to for a lot of my junior high, high school, most of college, and several years after life. Gideon goes from this loudmouthed, sarcastic, two-handed sword-wielding badass to the complete opposite, because a pretty girl with a soft-spoken voice has given her some attention for the first time in her life. And again, Moira's voiceover for her really sells the experience as well, to the point where I'm feeling like Gideon anytime Dulcinea opens her mouth. Then we meet one of my favorite characters, Magnus Quinn from the 5th house. Magnus is not really a great cavalier at all. He kind of accidentally became one, but he is somewhat of a father figure among the people of Canaan House, even if the 4th house teens make fun of him in their silly, drawn-out voices. He is amiable, he is polite, he likes to tell jokes, even some puns, which Gideon loves specifically. He likes to keep the peace, and Moira Quirk puts on a pretty unique voice for him. All of that combined makes it very easy to tell when he's talking among this cacophony of 15 plus characters that gets dumped on you in an instant. His personality is so vastly different from the rest of the cast that he's easy to pick out, and I got very familiar vibes from his wife, Abigail Pent, 5th house, as well. So that definitely helped out too. Him and Abigail were not necessarily comic relief, as there's enough sarcastic banter that even I need to step up my game, but they together are just a warm blanket in an otherwise brutally cold room. I should note that a lot of the characters you've heard about thus far are pretty young. Gideon is 18 years old. Harrow is 17, and a few others are within like a 5-year window, I think. Magnus, on the other hand, is 38 years old. And I got the vibe from this book and future books that anyone over the age of 30 might as well be 90 years old. Like Crux from Dreerbur sounds like he's 100. For all I know, he's 49. I still think of most of them as people around my age, though. Like I thought of Gideon as someone in her early 30s. I don't know if that's normal or weird, though, but it helped me immerse myself. Maybe I just thought it was like weird that I, a 35-year-old man, was listening to a book about teenage necromancers, and I just mentally adjusted their ages so I wouldn't feel as weird about it. This is your second spoiler warning. We are getting into deeper plot points now. The story is shifting. If there is a time to bail to read the book, it's probably now. Anyway, Magnus fucking dies, along with his wife, right after a dinner party for their 11th wedding anniversary. Are you fucking kidding me? Take anyone else, except Gideon and Harrow. Take almost anybody else. Not Magnus, dude. I was so enraged. The nicest people in the entire book. This place of just scared, sad, paranoid people. But mainly, the only person who I had really locked in on being their own person. Besides Gideon and Harrow, Magnus was the first character that I actually remembered who they were by the narration. Like, I could be like, oh, it's Magnus time, yay! I wonder what jokes he's gonna tell. Like, versus someone like Nibirius or Palamides talking, and then I have to be like, wait, who are they again? And like, why are they important? And like, what house do they belong with? I'm still torn up about it, man. I hate it. Why did Magnus have to go? Before that happens, though, we get our first glimpse into the game show part of the book. Gideon and Harrow find this secret laboratory, which feels very not of this world. The way it's described basically sounds like a modern day classroom or something, and it kind of pulled me out of the immersion a little bit until I got used to the idea. Even if the things happening within these rooms were still very magical or like necromantic in nature, I thought we were in some fantasy world with like spaceships and magic and necromancy and all that kind of stuff. And now I'm imagining like an office building. Although it's not like, we're in medieval Europe and then all of a sudden the main character's on a computer, right? So it's not completely out of the question, I guess. Long story short, Gideon and Harrow figure out the significance of the laboratory. There are a couple of chapters dedicated to this experience. They're pretty fun, and I really wish there was more of it. But then they head back upstairs, and that's where they find Magnus and Abigail on the floor, dead, and that leaves me incredibly devastating, and that's when the experience in the book shifts from game show to murder mystery. The necromancers are trying to figure out what they need to do in order to turn into a lictor, and they also need to figure out why people are dying or like who's killing them. At first, I was down for this challenge. We have continued to have some amount of direction. First, it was escape Dreerbur, and then it's go to Canaan House, and then it's become a lictor. Now we gotta figure out like all the murders. Okay, it's a lot, but okay. However, I'm worried that too much stuff is going to be happening, and I'm going to lose track, and that's exactly what happens. This would come to bother me a little bit as the book progressed. I liked the idea of having to, find out more significant parts about the laboratory and, solving these puzzles and these mysteries, mainly to see how these two people who freaking hated each other would fare in these challenges. That being said, the cracks in their hatred did start to show themselves, though. Like Harrow saying Gideon could kill her when she was in a weakened state, and Gideon just tells her to shut the hell up, despite the fact that Gideon averages one fantasy of dropping her off of a cliff per chapter. Or like when Harrow realizes that she needs Gideon to find her trustworthy if she is to succeed in the lictor trials, right? Piece by piece, their relationship starts to blossom. They get those moments of camaraderie, which I really, really started to adore. As time went on, the game show parts took a significant backseat to the murder part, which, I understand tends to be a pretty pressing issue in the grand scheme of everything, right? But in my mind, it was simpler to understand the laboratory game show stuff than the murder mystery stuff, because the murder mystery stuff meant I had to hear more people talking, people who I still had not really figured out their names and the conversations that would come as a result. Like everything about people. I don't have anything against people talking in these books. Hell, in the second book, I wish there was a significant amount more talking. But at the time, it was easier for my feeble brain to follow the idea of puzzle solving versus murder solving. The bulk of the book, Acts 3 and 4, take up both of these plot points with various interhouse drama about how these situations should be handled, from the people getting killed to gaining lictorhood to everything in between. More people get killed, and it becomes easier and easier to put names to faces. And the main reason I can sum up the acts like that is because on first read, while I could tell you generally what was happening, putting names to voices was a struggle for a little while longer. This is your third and final spoiler warning. I know you're this far in, I know, but maybe you've gotten some kind of an interest in the book, so I'm giving you one more chance to dip out now and read for yourself, because I really think you should. One section that actually kind of hit me in a much more real way on first read was the end of the third act with the teens of the fourth house. This whole time, they had been described as if they were the most annoying shitheads of all time, but nothing really about them came across like that to me. Like, maybe a couple of times they were like being a little annoying, if that. Like, even early on, I found them somewhat endearing when they were at their most obnoxiously described, which made chapter 25 all the more gut-wrenching and shocking to listen to. Even on my first time book report themed listen, I still felt so bad for these kids because from the beginning, they have had it rough. Losing Magnus and Abigail felt like it removed any sense of stability they might have had. I could visualize Jean-Marie's tantrum as they escaped from the basement labs, my stone exterior eroding away just a little bit as I hear fidelity, fidelity, fidelity as her and Gideon ran from a giant bone construct. Gideon's dread after waking up from her quick sleep and subsequent self-pity driven conversation with Palamedes and Dulcinea afterwards. Just two kids wrapped up in a chain of events completely out of their control. It was so unexpected. I literally said, oh shit, after the first event occurred. God, even 3 spoiler warnings deep, I still want to keep some stuff for the book. Another big turning point for Harrow and Gideon's relationship emerges. Gideon thinks Harrow is the murderer because she finds something that does not belong. Harrow is alone all the time. Gideon has no idea what she's doing, and honestly, Harrow gives off that kind of vibe with how competitive and ruthless she can be, which we'll learn more about why she is the way that she is. And, I honestly thought it could have been her too. Like, she's been more isolated than Jalen Brunson running the Knicks offense, right? Really, Datto? Sports in the middle of the book? I kind of thought this would be her, like, big rise to power moment. Not that I really had any idea of, like, what direction the book was going in. It's found to be not true, to my relief, but they have that classic, like, end of Act 2 in a movie relationship moment where conversations start to go poorly and they're back to hating each other again. First read, I didn't think of it too much. Like, it didn't really affect me. Second read, so much more devastating when I'm actually, like, locked in. What follows, though, chapter 31, is my favorite part in all 3 books. This is where Harrowhark finally decides to tell Gideon everything. Although Gideon was starting to get some information from some other sources, so Harrow gives in and just absolutely poured her heart out about all the things that she had dealt with in her life, how she even came to exist in the first place, the stuff that happened with her parents, all these other things. Basically, either on the verge of tears or already there. And this is probably the closest I came to crying during, I think, like every book that I read. I think I did a little bit. I'm trying to remember correctly. I think I did. And after Harrow had told Gideon everything, even though Gideon's been treated like dirt, through her own sarcastic, sunglasses-wearing facade, deep down, she is still sympathetic to a person who has shown her nothing but cruelty and hatred for pretty much every moment of her life, minus the past maybe couple of days. It is a very emotional, very vulnerable moment from both Harrow and Gideon, with Harrow just breaking down towards the end of the conversation. Pretty much the only time you ever see her like this. Her calling Gideon her only friend hits harder than the skeletal construct on a fourth house teenager. I don't think there's even been mention of the word friend between the two until now. I could be wrong. I didn't go back and check. I didn't know that this was what I wanted, but after experiencing it, it's what I've wanted the whole time. And I never feel like I get something that hits this hard for a while, if ever again. Some more inter-house drama happens, most of which is laboratory and murder-driven, so let's get to the end. The ending, it confused me a lot on, again, first read, although knowing there were a couple of more books to go, I was okay with being like a little confused at this time. The ending reveals that the person behind the murders this whole time is a character that has never been mentioned in the entire book, Kithaerea the First. So, quick question. Who the fuck is Kithaerea the First, and why is she trying to kill everybody? Being, of the first, to me, implies that she is with the Emperor, or this very house, but didn't people get invited here because the Emperor wanted it? Like, was this like a trick the whole time? Like, what the fuck? Turns out, Dulcinea is actually super dead, and she has been the entire time. Kithaerea just pretended to be her because no one actually knew what Dulcinea looked like. My original interpretation was not accurate whatsoever. I thought she was like possessing her body or something like that. It wasn't that, although that just left me even more confused once I learned what was actually happening. Now, I am glad that I was right about Dulcinea being sus literally the whole time, although, again, I know this bitch is sick all the time, not admissible in court. I just had a feeling something was going to happen with her. It's pushed so much in the book. She's dying. She's coughing up blood. She's coughing up a lung. She's coughing up her intestines, like whatever. Although, like, I guess technically it wasn't Dulcinea at all, really. The squad realizes that she's an imposter. They try to call an emergency meeting and try to do something about her. It does not go well. Eventually, you are down to just Harrow and Gideon and Camilla, the 6th House Cavalier, who I don't really have that much attachment to as of this moment on first read. I didn't get to know this character at all due to the insanity of characters in the middle of the book. Also, her necromancer, Palamides, did more of the talking in the book, and he ain't here. He ain't here no more. And Kithaerea is just destroying them. There is like zero hope. But Gideon does the one thing, which I kind of saw coming, that she thinks she can do to get anyone out alive. She impales herself on a spike so that Harrow can perform the act to become a lictor, which is essentially absorbing your cavalier's soul into you, or something like that. And she knows this because some stuff happened in some previous chapters that explains how becoming a lictor actually works. The main reason I wasn't completely satisfied with the ending was just because I felt blindsided by Kithaerea just being there. Like, maybe I'm stupid and I should have seen it coming. I'm not really good with that kind of foreshadowing or analysis, but it just kind of felt like, oh, yeah, and then there's this chick who you haven't heard of, or, I mean, I guess technically you've seen her, but, like, you haven't seen her this whole time, and she's actually the villain, and is killing everyone. I just kind of felt lost, like I missed something. Like, had I heard of her before, and I just, like, zoned out, or I forgot? Were there more hints that I just didn't acknowledge? And as quickly as she showed up, she's dead. She's fucking dead. So was I going to get any answers as to why she did all of this? The only time you get any kind of communication from Kytherea is when she writes the bloody notes on the walls during the murders of the Fourth House teens, but nothing really alludes to it being a completely new individual. I mean, I guess it really could have been anybody, now that I'm thinking about it. I was mopey for 5 days after the end of Gideon. I was so goddamn sad. I didn't really outwardly show it, but on the inside, especially like the first 2 days, I was miserable. The character that I liked so much, a lot of the characters that I liked so much were gone. I went through an identity crisis. Like, why couldn't I be a goddamn teenage necromancer in space? Even going through all the horrific shit they just did. I had completely and fully immersed myself in the setting. And the only thing that I regret was not going into the book with the attitude of enjoying the book versus just trying to make my wife happy. Again, this second listen has been more than making up. Well, I don't want to say more than making up, but it's been making up for it at least a bit. But if we ever invent some Ready Player One technology shit to immerse ourselves into media, goodbye world, you can call me Harrow. So I asked Danielle if I could tell this story in the video, and she said yes, so I'm gonna tell this story real quick. This all started because we started going to bed earlier at the start of 2025, and she would try to shove a Kindle in front of me to read. I secretly did start listening to the book, but after shutting down the Kindle shove like 3 nights in a row, I told her that I was listening to the book because I didn't want to continue this Kindle war for like however long it was going to go on for. Then I had mentioned on a live stream that I was struggling listening to the audiobook. This is before I was going on walks, and I was like only a couple of chapters in, and it was tough. She took that as me completely giving up on listening to the book. Like, she just thought I stopped. I started going on my walks to listen. She thought nothing of it. She thought nothing of me staring at the back of the seat in front of me on a 3-hour plane to Colorado, and nothing of the 3-hour return flight back home when I am normally watching something on my phone. Meanwhile, I thought she knew the whole time that I was just listening to the book. On the final night, I have 90 minutes of listening to do. Normally I'm out for 60 at the most, so she checks in on me, and I say, like, I'm just chilling. I'm just walking around, that's it. I was originally planning on listening to all 3 books before telling her that I finished everything, but I could tell something was off when I got home, so I showed her that I just like, I finished the first book. That's why I was out. And y'all, she started crying, and I was so confused. She thought that I had gave up almost immediately, and she had no idea that I was listening to the book. And she thought that I was going on my nightly walks because, and I quote, I thought she was annoying and that I wanted to get out of the house to get away from her, end quote. And I said, nope, I'm just listening to the book. It was the final chapters, so I was just out there for a while. So, yeah, you're dumb. Danielle, I love you. You're an idiot. Otherwise, I wouldn't have listened to any of this. So get used for content, moron. As I transitioned from book 1 to book 2, after a short break, I got pretty excited again. Gideon and Harrow are united as one. Their relationship fully changed for the better. What kind of mysteries and adventures are they going to get into? What kind of silly, sarcastic banter are they going to have? He said, not knowing how anything about Lichterhood worked, thinking that they would share a a consciousness or something like that. I do know that there are 2 short stories to read as well. No, I have not read them, and until a nice British lady reads them to me, I probably won't. That's a lie. I probably will at some point. I'm so immersed that I would actually read on a book Gideon stuff, even if a nice British lady isn't reading them to me. Here we go. Book number 2, Harrow the Ninth. The book is told in the second person, and you are Harrow Hark, at least for a good chunk of it. This is apparently not a normal way that books are written. Nice try, Tamsyn. This is the second book I've ever read in my life, so I'm too stupid to be tricked by your point of view shift. The book starts with you literally getting stabbed in the back, the day before the Emperor is going to be murdered. You, as Harrow, are dying. Smash cut to 14 months before this moment, where you are back on the 9th house with who was supposed to be your original cavalier, Ortis Niganad, learning that you have been invited to Canaan House. So already we're going to be juggling 2 timelines or something like that, like the actual story and then what appears to be some sort of alternate universe where Gideon is not part of the equation at all, I think. Now, I personally am not a huge fan of like flashback type episodes and television shows, and I had very familiar feeling vibes from this. Sure, certain times I want to learn some more backstory, but sometimes I just kind of view it as a filler episode, and I was definitely worried very early on about it just kind of feeling like a filler thing. Act 1 starts us in a hospital of some kind on a ship called the Erebos. Harrow was rescued from Canaan House, so she is in recovery. She's got what seems like Gideon's sword, so surely Gideon is going to get mentioned soon. Chapter 1. There's no sign of Gideon. Okay. Chapter 2. Chapter 3. Chapter 4. Nothing. More and more chapters go by. With each one, no mention of Gideon. To the point where I eventually determined that it is done very intentionally. The author was deliberate about not mentioning Gideon at all. Much to my dismay, going even as far as saying that her cavalier is Ortis Niganad, not Gideon. Here you meet a couple of characters. Mercymorn, one of the original lictors, and John, aka God. I found it weird that everyone else had these like super extravagant names like Dulcinea and Harrow Hark and Mercymorn, and then you literally just have John God over here, but okay, it's John. Ianthe Tridentarius is also here. She had a pretty significant moment in the first book. She revealed how to become a lictor by becoming a lictor, but I presumed her dead as she got into a battle with Cytherea, and she did not win that one, having her arm chopped off and being left for dead. Alas, she is alive, with the arm that she had severed returned to her, but in bad condition. I actually don't know if it's her arm, but it's an arm. Ianthe will become Harrow's main companion in this book, and among the things that I wish this second book had more of, it would be even more interactions between the two. Ianthe is pretty quiet, or rather short on words, but on the inside is this super intense, driven, competitive necromancer who wanted to achieve lictorhood by any means. Very similar to Harrow, and she gets there all right. I didn't even scratch the surface of the third house plot points and twists in the first book, and that's because the first time around, I barely knew what was even happening, so let's quickly explain that. In book 1, it's eventually revealed that Ianthe is so prolific because her twin sister, Coronabeth, didn't actually have any necromantic abilities, so she had to train hard enough to cover for Coronabeth, which made her really, really powerful as a result. She was given this low-spoken voice with occasional vocal fry, which came off as very subdued and low-key, but at the same time almost promiscuous and tempting. She comes off as always confident, never shaken, but she has quite a lot of moments actually in book 2 where that confidence completely shatters, including very early on, some of the earliest interactions. I think I mainly just liked hearing her talk at the end of the day, but I still did like her character as well. Moira's Ianthe voice in this book is in full effect, as Ianthe doesn't actually talk that much in the first book. I love the voice done to the point where I will drunkenly use it in front of Danielle, and you are real lucky that I can't do it very well. Otherwise, I would have been talking like her for the whole goddamn video. Eventually, you board a ship or a space station or something called the Mithraeum, aka God's ship. I'm going to call it a spaceship. And you're preparing for your new life after meeting a couple more new characters. You got Augustine the First, and you got Ortis the First. Okay. Immediately, even I know there's something up here, okay? Because there ain't no way Harrow's original Cavalier and this guy got the same name out of coincidence. Maybe Ortis is named after this Ortis. Ortis Niganad is named after this one. But did they even know that this original Ortis existed? Like, I'm on to you, okay? Something's up. I'm probably too stupid to figure it out, but I know something's up. Meanwhile, you have this alternate reality timeline happening where you go back to Canaan House and all that, and like, I'm kind of rolling my eyes at this, but then, a familiar voice. It's Abigail. Maybe Magnus returns as well. He does. And teacher's here too, and they're talking about someone named the Sleeper who shouldn't be awakened, but okay, man, these alternate timeline sequences are really starting to take a toll on me. Like, I'm not smart enough to figure out what the hell's going on here. Like, obviously, this needs to have some kind of relevance to the story because we wouldn't be spending so much time here if it wasn't relevant. But it was really tough to keep track. It feels like every other section ends, or every like chapter ends with, this isn't how it happens, or is this how it happens? So now I'm trying to figure out what the hell that means on top of everything else that's happening, of which I am failing miserably to comprehend. I could tell you after each chapter the events of that chapter, but how it all links together, no shot at all. You also combine this with the main story that's happening right now, and I'm not gonna lie to you, I am rage listening to this book for a good chunk of it. That direction that I was talking about for all of book one, it feels all but gone. We have the overarching plot, which I guess is just waiting for the Emperor's murder, but everything else just kind of feels like killing time. What the fuck happened to my setting? Where's my Gideon? Where are my adventures of Harrow and Gideon? We went from spooky castle with hidden secrets and characters of all these different personality types to the Mithraeum, which feels like the most miserable place of all time, filled with the most miserable people of all time. Mercymorn and Ortis treat both of the new lictors like crap. Hell, Ortis tries to kill Harrowhark over a dozen times throughout the book for reasons I'm still not sure are ever really elaborated on besides some vague hints, although they are fun sequences to listen to. Augustine isn't much better, but he has to train Ianthe, who has this bum arm, so Ianthe is just like completely checked out for a really big chunk of the book. And yeah, like, okay, everyone was getting murdered in the first book, but like the setting and the vibes and the characters, I liked it. There was like intrigue and mystery and Dulcinea flirting and murder and Dulcinea flirting. Several chapters into this second book, of which I haven't even mentioned what the hell is actually going on. And all I'm doing is I'm just longing for Gideon, and I'm longing for Canaan House in the first book. What the hell is actually even going on? Honestly, I feel like it's not much. In the main story, we learn about why God needs lictors, and that's to kill resurrection beasts who are chasing after them, and they like to eat planets, so lictors also need to like suck the soul out of planets so that the resurrection beasts don't feed on the planets to get stronger. but one of them is coming for them, but it's going to be like 10 months before it gets to them, although 10 months in their time might as well be like 14 seconds. So it feels like it's just a lot of waiting around and training and living with each other and not dying. I kind of equate this book to the evolution of a Dungeons and Dragons campaign that just got maybe a little out of hand with the scope. In a game of D&D, how do you usually form your starting party? Good chunk of the time, it's probably like mercs for hire. You meet in a tavern to help out the locals. Maybe you uncover some deeper mystery that ends up being the true plot line. And then before you know it, like 2 years later, the mission is to kill God. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing if that's what you're into, but personally, I enjoyed like smaller stakes campaigns that I've been a part of because they're a bit more grounded. And that's kind of what I liked about the first book. Well, we're now in the preparing to kill God stage of the series, figuratively and maybe quite literally. And I don't know how I felt about that. I cared about Gideon. I liked Gideon. I like Harrow too. But to chop off half their strengths and then move to this like even greater plot point, I guess that I thought things would still be a bit smaller scale, a bit more low to the ground. Also, you know, with Gideon, in the other plot line, you're trying to figure out how to deal with the sleeper, but you got people dying left and right over here. People are getting shot. I'm sorry. With guns, like pew pew guns. I don't know why a gun is so jarring to hear about when the book literally starts with the knowledge that 3 of God's warships got nuked, nuclear bomb, and like 18,000 soldiers died. Some group called Blood of Eden just nuking God's people or whatever. Like, I guess it just kind of felt out of place for a world that usually uses like necromancy and magic and swords to then shift to a world where more traditional war is also still very much a thing. Finally, a glimmer of joy appears in Act 3 when Harrowhark finally attempts to do something about Ortis continuing to try to kill her all the time on the Mithraeum. She learns how to make soup with bone marrow and gets Ortis to have some and promptly explodes him, although it doesn't end up killing him, and really it just makes God kind of annoyed. But like, why is God not stopping Ortis from killing Harrow? Hello? You brought her here for what exactly? If to not keep her protected from the few lictors who are supposed to be on the same team? Like, I thought, same team here, guys. I'm just continuing to be enraged this whole time, and finally, I get a little something to be happy or excited about, even if the plan doesn't exactly work. Harrow also fixes Ianthe's arm by slicing it off completely and remaking her arm bones. But like just her bones, because like, you know, bones. As thanks, Ianthe helps Harrow plot an assassination attempt on Ortis, which is done by having Mercymorn and Augustine distract God. How, you ask? Oh, with a threesome in the middle of dinner. Not exactly how I expected that one to roll out, but anything to surprise me will do at this point, considering the state of rage that I am in, that I've been listening to people be miserable to each other for what is now weeks IRL time, but in the book, months. But in hunting down Ortis, Harrow finds him on the brink of death, thanks to Cytherea, whose body has been on the Mithraeum the whole time, although that hasn't really been a secret. There's like a funeral for her and this whole thing, but like she's alive now, and how is that working? Ortis is spared, and in turn, Ortis tells Harrow how to protect herself from him in this like weird moment of clarity that he has or something. This relationship is really goddamn confusing. Like he's being mind controlled or something. I still have no idea. Alternate reality world. People are still dying or they're killing each other, but Abigail and Magnus being their reliable selves is such a refresher in this world of misery, even if there is yet another murderer on the loose. Then we hit a plot point which comes as quickly as it goes, which I don't think gets elaborated on until the third book. Harrow is sucking on some planet juice like a Capri Sun when 3 people I thought were dead just show up on the same damn planet. Camilla Hecht, who is the 6th House Cavalier, Judith Deuteros, 2nd House Necromancer, and Corona Beth, 3rd House Fake Necromancer. And they are with Blood of Eden now, who I thought were the bad guys. So like, okay, now we're fighting them? Great. I don't know what's happening. Also, Camilla asks Harrow to help find out if her necromancer Palamedes is still alive as like a ghost somewhere after the events of the first book. He's essentially made a little bubble for himself in what is the sort of afterlife or something, aka the river, TM, which I haven't touched on at all, despite it being referenced a lot and like the main way that they travel around the universe, because I'm still not 100% on what the river even is. Also, at least I find out that Ortis's attempts on Harrow's life wasn't his idea, but like, that's still not that helpful if I don't know who ordered them in the first place. Act 5. It is the final act. I need some answers. I need something to happen in this book because it has been 4 acts of bickering, miserable people supposedly preparing for an apocalyptic event with this resurrection beast showing up and an alternate reality of something that I thought we already experienced, but apparently not. And in the transition from Act 4 to 5, I finally get some goddamn answers about Gideon. Harrow performed brain surgery on herself in between the end of book 1 and the start of book 2 to purge Gideon from her own mind so that they would be like fully combined, or she wouldn't remember that Gideon's dead or something. Rather, I think she overwrote the word Gideon with Ortis. That's why I've been without my precious Gideon, because you were too sad to deal with what she did for you that you had to brain surgery yourself into forgetting. It's not that I don't understand. Grief takes many forms. At least I finally got some answers. It truly was the worst thing that anyone has ever done to Harrow. She was not kidding. As for the narration, it's been Gideon the whole time. Probably should have came to that realization sooner. She's been living in the background of Harrow's mind. And I think I had come to some sort of conclusion at some point in like Act 3 or Act 4 that there could only be so many second-person narrators in the book. Gideon is obviously one of them, but there kept being mention of a hallucination simply named The Body, which I'm guessing is from the actual locked tomb because there's a body in the locked tomb, but it existed as its own entity. So I wasn't sure if it was going to be narrating too much because Harrow and it would have some interactions even though they were hallucinations. So if you remember, we got stabbed at the beginning of the book, and Harrow is now in that alternate reality dream world while Gideon finally emerges, but in Harrow's body. The only thing that mattered to me was that Gideon was back, and I was going to save her every single goddamn moment that she was. This is what I've been waiting for since the beginning. Let me get my freaking glasses. It is goddamn Gideon time. The main issue I ended up having with Act 5 and a lot of the reveals is that a lot of it hinges on some of these names you've been hearing throughout the book of older figures, original cavaliers and necromancers from the first days of this world, of Mercy Morn's cavalier and Augustine's and Ortis's, things that I had not been paying close enough attention to because I wasn't in the mood to learn even more names and an already long list of names because I didn't know how important they would end up being, and because everyone is so goddamn miserable. But these reveals towards the end heavily involve these names and these characters to the point where it feels like book 1 is almost irrelevant. Yeah, it gets the engine started, but it's feeling like such a small piece in a much bigger puzzle that I was not prepared for. There is so much to break down about Act 5 that I'm barely going to get to even a quarter of it. The alternate reality, Not so alternate, Harrow too has created some kind of bubble in the river, TM, where she's not quite dead nor alive within it, and this has been some kind of hallucination the entire time whenever she's unconscious. That's why there's like a lot of flipping forth, back and forth between the chapters. But also, it's like not a hallucination because her actual soul is being haunted by the sleeper. Long story short, they kill the sleeper, although how that happens feels like it was maybe a universe rule-breaking event, but I maybe just don't know enough about how this works. I don't know enough about how the fifth house's powers work, but I got a little bit of like through the power of friendship, nothing can stop us kind of vibes from it. In the actual moment of reading this part, I thought it was really fun, but when I stopped to think about it, I don't know if I was, I don't know, I'm kind of like in the middle. But I'm kind of like wanting to give Ortis the W here because it's the only non-completely pathetic thing that he does in the whole book. And I haven't gotten here on my second listen through, so maybe I'll like it more on the second time around. Then, in the real world, Gideon has now finally emerged, inhabiting Harrow's body, who just wakes up to total chaos on this ship because the beast is here and it's got a bunch of baddies on it and heralds and ghosts and whatever else, so she's just slicing away at everything. Mercymorn is revealed to be the person who stabbed Harrow at the beginning, and after seeing specifically her eyes, tries to do it again. But goddamn Kithareya shows up with a gun, like a shotgun, and shoots Mercymorn, but she doesn't kill her. Sorry, I'm not going to re-record that. I'm too far in. After listening to the first book again, I now know the importance of Gideon's eye color and why Tamsyn probably brings it up multiple times. But in this moment, I did not remember her eye color, nor why it was relevant at all. Now, before we continue, I need to talk about 3 lines that ripped me so goddamn hard out of the immersion of this world that it was like I got punched by Doctor Strange and my soul left my body. The first time is when God said, "None houses left grief," in response to what would happen if he died. None houses left grief, page 344, referencing the Nun Pizza Left Beef meme. I let that one slide because if you didn't know it, it just seems like an odd sentence. It's a pretty niche meme reference. There are plenty of like meme and pop culture references within both books so far, but they've been subtle enough that I haven't noticed too many, or maybe I just don't know as many memes as I thought I did. I don't know. I thought I was on my game, but I guess not. Someone out there on the internet has compiled a big old list of them in like all the books. On second listening of Gideon, there's a studied the blade bit towards the beginning, which I just found it like a little cheeky in retrospect. The second time is when we meet a new character, again, at the goddamn end of the book, when I don't really want any new characters. Kithareya is not Kithareya, but rather a person named Commander Wake, who is just possessing Kithareya's body, who actually had a baby with the Emperor, aka God, aka John, who I think Wake was going to use as a necromantic bomb to try to open the locked tomb. And that baby, as you can probably guess, is goddamn Gideon. And Wake is also the sleeper, as I suspected after we hit that part in the book, who must be killed in both Harrow's bubble world and the real world if it is to be banished. Why do they want to open the tomb? They're part of Blood of Eden, and what I've gathered from Blood of Eden so far is that they really hate God. So I guess opening the tomb would make him really mad, because like he set it up to not be opened, right? What ripped me out of my body was her actual name. Actual name. Awake remembrance of these valiant dead. Okay. Kia hua kote pai. All right. Back to reality. Oops, there goes gravity. Shut the fuck up right fucking now. What in the goddamn 9 houses did you just say to me, you little bitch? I will have you know, I graduated top of my class in Drearber, and I've been involved in numerous secret raids of Blood of Eden, and I have over 300. Immersion has been demolished. I have whiplash. Not a few pages later, on page 468, and I quote, "Meet Commander Wake Me Up Inside. Sincerest apologies if I got that wrong." End quote. I'll kill myself and everyone in here. What the hell is going on? This is in book lore. This is actual dialogue being said by people. I literally text my wife that if I hear another blatantly obvious reference to real life, I will stop reading this book. Never have I been sucked out of an experience that quickly when all I have been is fully immersed. I don't want real life. Real life is ass. I want to listen to stories of necromancers half my age doing cool shit. Why the fuck is this person's name an Eminem lyric? It is so world-shatteringly insane. It is so egregiously blatant that I was waiting for Moira Quirk to say, "Just kidding, here's what's actually happening." You want to know the crazy thing too? My wife already told me a few years ago that there are connections to modern day that happen in the third book. And I was still in disbelief when I heard this stuff. I knew something was coming. But after so long of it not happening, it's like I, too, performed brain surgery on myself for my Gideon to also finally emerge in the form of the most insane name for a character I've ever heard. Okay. I regain. We go back. Ortis, aka Gideon the First, kills Commander Wake before more detail is given out. Mercy Morn learns that perfect lictorhood is a real thing through the fact that Gideon Hark and God have the same eyes or something. There's a whole thing about a necromancer's and a cavalier's eyes doing some stuff when they become lictor. I'm not going to spend 10 minutes there because I did not understand it at the time, although all of the dozens of sentences about how people's eyes look all of a sudden make way more sense now. The point is, Mercy Morn believes God lied about having to actually kill your cavalier to become a lictor. Mercy is pissed about that and kills God. Well, she tries. He almost immediately recomposes himself, kills her back, and asks everyone else for their loyalty. Everyone seems kind of cool with it. Augustine isn't, though, and he knocks the entire ship into the river, which eventually descends down into a gaping maw where they usually shove resurrection beasts. By the way, the beast that they were fighting, no idea what happened to it. The most I heard was that they scared it off. So the whole thing that they've been waiting to fight, the whole book, it just leaves conveniently in the middle of all this shit. I guess we'll deal with that later. I don't know. The whole point of the damn book was preparing for the beast fight, and now it's just gone. So, like, I don't know. Sure, whatever. Maybe it's not completely gone. I don't know where it goes. They fight in space. Both the Gideons are stuck in the ship, although Gideon the First is revealed to be Pira Deve, who is his cavalier. Gideon number 1 died in battle with the beast. Okay, so it did actually do something. Ianthe ends up helping God in a "are we the baddies" kind of way, while Augustine gets sucked into the maw of the river. Gideon dies as she hears someone starting CPR. So after all that, we finally get Gideon back, and she just dies again. You're really gonna do this to me, huh? You're really gonna tease 80% of the book, finally have the thing that I want come back in the last 20, and then you're just gonna rip it away again. Okay, that's the kind of game we're playing. Okay. Despite my hyperbolic rage, I still did enjoy listening to the second book, although it did take a little bit more to get ramped up to speed. I was still pretty invested in what was happening, but it was a brutally more difficult read than the first book. Multiple timelines to keep track of, miserable people to deal with. I stayed invested for Harrow to see what would end up happening with her, but I could feel that over time, this was becoming less and less about her and more about whatever the bigger picture was in this universe. That wasn't really what I was expecting, though, or rather hoping for. I like Dianthe, but I'm not sure if that's because I liked the voice that Moira put on, or if it's because she's also a pretty sarcastic individual and a good counter personality to Harrow. Like a version of Gideon who wouldn't have taken any of Harrow's shit. Maybe it was maybe it was the voice and the character. I wish she was around more. I feel like the most dialogue I got with her and Harrow was when Harrow performed a brain surgery on herself. Most of the other times, it felt like just such a small amount of lines between each other. It was like 2 or 3 lines or like 2 or 3 words out of Ianthe. I'm just like, please talk more and crush me and talk more. And I did like God, although I didn't like him when he wasn't defending Harrow. And then, at the end, it's pretty intentional to not really be too sure what to think of him anymore, right? Oh, but I long for simpler times. I still long for Canaan House, the first one. I long for Dreerbur, even though we were barely there for any amount of time. I still long for Gideon and Harrow antics and banter, even if we did get one last little moment at the end of book 2 where Harrow anchors herself to the locked tomb to give Gideon a chance to live, finding a porn magazine of hers and closing her eyes. And as I started book 3, I did not think that I would miss book 2 very much. At all. But after the first set of chapters, I started looking back at book 2 with much fonder eyes. Book 3 does not start on Dreerbur. It does not start in Canaan House. It does not start on the Mithraeum or the Erebos, but in some wasteland, war-torn city with Pyrrha de Vey, Camilla, and Palamedes inhabiting the same body, and some girl who is pretty quickly deduced to be Harrowhark. At least physically. Mentally, she is someone who was born about 6 months ago as a 19-year-old, 18, whatever. So I'm guessing there's some sort of amnesia at play here based on the events at the end of the second book, but I'm probably not going to find out too much for a while. But Harrow, to be known as Nona, hence the name of the book, is not her normal Harrow personality because she is a completely different person. She is much more cheery and upbeat despite living in a hellhole, but also very naive. She is quite literally the opposite of Harrow. The book cover says, "You will love Nona and Nona loves you." We'll see. We also have a new point of intrigue. The locked tomb opens in 5 days. It's announced at the start in a very similar fashion that you're told about the Emperor's murder in book number 2, with the book taking place over those 5 days. Familiar vibes have set in. Instead of wondering where Gideon and Harrow are, I am longing for the misery of Mercymorn and Augustine, who I will remind you feel like some of the most miserable people on the planet. Unlike in book 1, though, the conclusion of book 2 does not leave much for ambiguity. The Mithraeum is basically destroyed, which is where the majority of the book took place. Mercy is very dead, and Augustine is giga dead, which means the only lictors are, I guess, just Ianthe, right? Like the last we heard of Harrow, she anchored herself in the locked tomb, but what anchoring means in this case, I'm still not too sure. I'm guessing her soul or like her spirit or whatever is at the tomb, but her physical body is here, and they gotta be like reconnected or something like that. Then, similar to the not actually alternate reality chapters of book 2, we have God telling Harrow about how he became who he is, about how he became God. And this shit is indeed attached to modern day Earth, although a significantly more apocalyptic one, which given how things look today, seems almost impossible to pull off, but you kind of did it. It's also pretty obvious that a lot of the people he's talking about in these stories are characters from the previous book. And I know that, look, I might be like a non-book reading dumb idiot stone man, but you are not going to slip A for Augustine, G for Gideon, and M for Mercymorn by me, okay? And I'm not too sure how to feel about this. To some people, the fact that this is connected to some version of current day Earth might be pretty neat. My wife was super into it. But I went into the experience wanting to escape all of this reality, immersed in that initial world of the 9 houses with necromancers and mysteries and magic and swords and whatever else was going on. There was something mysterious and mythical about just living in a world where necromancers exist, our modern day Earth doesn't, and that's the goddamn deal. It took me out of the experience knowing it's connected to a modern day Earth, even if it was 10,000 years ago. It took until day 4-ish of 5 in the book for me to come to terms with this and get back to just enjoying the experience, although not without wincing at mentions of the word deepfake or cryptocurrency slingshotting me back to 2021. I mean, the former more than the latter anyway. I'm not really going to talk about this side of the story too much until the end, because for the most part, it was pretty easy to follow along, and it was neat listening to it. I was pretty intrigued. It's just God talking, and it didn't feel like there was much subtlety here, which to me was a breath of fresh air compared to what I would end up going through with the other side of the book. Most of these chapters start with, he said, and he just yaps about exactly what happened in the past. Anyway, main story, the 3 of them live in a crappy apartment building, barely hanging on day to day. Camilla tries to get Nona, aka Harrow, to remember more and more about who she is or was or whatever. She asks about her dreams. She asks her to play with bones, anything to maybe trigger a response in like who she used to be. Doesn't Camilla know that this is Harrow if she's making her run these like pretty specific tests? Maybe she's just, again, trying to trigger a response in Harrow to see if she wakes up. And I was like, oh, right, this is who I am now. This area is also very anti-magic, anti-necromancers, coming up with their own slurs for them, calling them zombies and whatnot. It's confirmed later on that they are in Blood of Eden territory, and they do not like necromancers. But I gathered that from book 2 pretty early on. So now I'm torn because I love all the necromancy stuff, but maybe God not so good? I guess that's kind of the point. It's still pretty ambiguous. Who is good? Who's bad? Is there even a good? Is there even a bad? Maybe just everyone kind of sucks. Nona eventually is allowed to go to school in an abandoned building with a bunch of other kids. The kids have nicknames like Hot Sauce and Honesty, although one of them is just like straight up named Kevin. And, you know, they slowly become friends, and most of day 1 and day 2's chapters are taken up with world building and character introductions, learning the way they live, etc., etc. So, again, pretty dramatic shift here compared to book 1 to 2. We've ditched the spaceships, we've ditched a lot of the necromancy stuff, but not entirely. We're now in a rundown city, and the next characters in line are 7 to 14-year-olds. And I feel like the response here is supposed to be intrigue, but for me, I mean, it was a little bit, but it felt more like that I was going to have to wait another 80% of a book for like a thing to happen. It too feels a little directionless. I don't feel like I have something to really latch into. Sure, there's the longer plot points. What happens when the tomb opens? What happened to Harrow? But they're so far away right now, and they're not going to be answered anytime soon. It's like a set of monkey bars, but only the first bar and the 13th bar are there, and the middle is just like there's nothing to grab. So I feel like I'm just waiting for something to happen. And when I'm waiting like that, it's easy for me to lose details that might be important in the future. There's a chapter with a fun sequence about Nona wanting to go to the ocean to swim, but Camilla having to kill a bunch of police or like Blood of Eden to like get out of a jam. You kind of learn that Camilla and Palamedes have this strained relationship in every sense of the word. And okay, that's fine and dandy, and it's a neat sequence, but like, I would love for something to happen. You learn about the kids They're all pretty crude. Like this 12-year-old is out dealing drugs on the street. It's like, it's not a good time for them. Like, I get it. But they're still very respectful of the teacher, not to be confused with teacher from book one or anything, of the teacher and the angel who specifically teaches the science part of the class at the school, which they all love. But I don't feel like I have a lot. I feel like I have nothing to be like, okay, so they're trying to do this, so that then this, and then this. Like day number 2, what happens? Nona gets ready for school. There's some conversations. She fakes speaking to someone named Crown because Hot Sauce asked her to. She remembers the time that she went swimming and Cam kills off like a dozen people who seemed like police or some sort of blood of Eden type thing because I guess they were like threatening her. And then she looks at the big blue orb in the sky that makes everybody go crazy. Or like some people anyway. The only thing that has made progression, it feels like time. I personally don't care that much about the kids, and save for one thing later on, they feel as relevant as some of the people from book 1, if not less so. I got about 15 chapters in, which is the middle of the 3rd day in the book, and I ended up taking a week break because I went out of town and I refuse to listen to this book in any other way that I have been, which is walking around at night. And when I came back, I thought I had forgotten a lot of the book. I knew basic details and the basic gist of it, but that was it. And the site that I was using for chapter summaries didn't do them for this book. So I was kind of out on my own here, which also sucked. And as much as I wanted to go back to like re-listen to things that I missed, I feel like if I can forget in quotes, everything that happened after just like a week of not reading, maybe I'm just not enjoying the book, which was like kind of devastating for me because I was like, damn, man, I want to like it. I think part of it comes from the fact that I didn't know what I was signing up for when I started this journey. I thought I signed up for Gideon and Harrow go on adventures and talk shit to each other. And in reality, it's more like, this is what happens when you can't trust the man who became God and the God who became man because he might be a liar or maybe he's not. I'm also not a huge read between the lines guy. My wife Danielle is the complete opposite. She loves this book, so she's looking for clues everywhere about who Nona actually is and trying to pick up on details that could foreshadow the solution. And in comparison, I am big dumb idiot man who is just listening to the story to be entertained the same way that I watch TV shows and movies. Danielle is always trying to piece things together in the middle of it, whereas I just sit like a log and I take everything at face value and just try to absorb it like that. Maybe that's my issue, you know? Maybe it's just inexperience in reading. Because this is the 3rd book I ever read. Or maybe I'm just big dumb idiot man who takes everything at face value, never really searching for any deeper hidden meanings or anything like that. You know? I don't like to think that hard. I'd rather just be entertained by the twist at the end instead of trying to figure out what it'll be for the entire movie. You know? I don't have to be good at consuming media. I just want to consume the media. But this didn't feel like something you could just sit through and then absorb at face value and then go home. It feels like it expected more of me, but I didn't know that it was going to expect that much from me because I'm big dumb idiot man who hasn't read any books. So for all I know, there was a lot more to absorb in days 1 and 2 that I just didn't. Or maybe there wasn't anything else to absorb at all, and like I got it. I don't know. But finally, day 3, we get some action. Some people burst into their apartment and they all get rounded up and they're getting taken away. How? Why? I don't give a shit. Something's actually freaking happening now. Finally. Turns out this was a planned abduction and they're being taken to some kind of Blood of Eden type headquarters. They speak with someone named We Suffer. This naming system still kind of lost on me, but okay, I'm trying. The name has been mentioned before as well in the book, so it's not completely unheard of. But then you find Crown, a woman named Crown, also known as Corona Beth Tridentarius. She is goddamn alive. And she is, I think, a big deal in this organization. We also get introduced to Pash, aka Our Lady of the Passion, who I start to like a bit more when we get a bit more of her later on in the book. Judith Deuteros is also here, and I will not understand what's happening with her for a very long time, if ever. She flips between normal coherence, barely being alive, and complete insanity during the book, and my wife had to explain her entire scenario after I finished the book. Apparently, Blood of Eden is split into multiple factions that are feuding with each other. Like, one side wants Nona to try to make her into a weapon, but the other side doesn't. I never really click what's going on with these factions, and fortunately, I don't think it ends up being super important. This whole section is when it feels like the key is finally turning the engine on. I'm getting some idea of what the goals are, but it's not until the next chapter that something happens to trigger the rest of the book. I get my direction. It is day number 3, 5 p.m. My queen, Ianthe, now Ianthe Nibirius, Saint of Awe, appears on a screen in front of the city. She talks in an even more exaggerated Ianthe voice, like she's doing an impression of herself. She's on God's side, which doesn't really surprise me. She literally saved him at the end of the second book. And I'm honestly not sure still who the good guys are and the bad guys are and who is even fighting who, other than like a vague, like, it's Blood of Eden versus God, but also other factions of Blood of Eden. I'm still not sure. But she gives the ultimatum to the people that essentially says, shut down BOE and stop attacking us, or else. But there's someone else on the screen with her, and it's very strongly suggested that it is Gideon, although with a different name that I honestly don't remember because I didn't write it down. And again, more interesting conversations are happening. I'm slowly but surely getting sucked back into the experience as some of the main plot lines reveal themselves in more significant manners. I got some hooks, right? I got some short-term direction to sink into. What are they going to do? How are they going to respond to the threats? What also is even going on still? And then Nona gets shot in the head at school. She's alive though, thanks to her insane regenerative powers, which are hinted at up until this point. So it's not coming from nowhere that she's like this powerful, right? She wakes to the sound of a voice I've only heard once before, Our Lady of the Passion, who was there at the meeting with We Suffer, talking with the Angel. I guess Pash is actually the Angel's bodyguard. And we start to get more and more about Nona. She's the Lictor Project. What the hell is the Lictor Project? Why is all this happening? Who the hell are any of these people? They all end up fighting off the dozen or so people after them, while Nona and the leader of the kids, Hot Sauce, hide in a closet. Now, I said all that, I explained all that, so that I could react to this. Up until this moment, I had not really cared that much about the kids. I didn't find them super annoying or anything, but I also did not find them that appealing. I didn't really care about their conversations or much of that stuff. I wasn't interested in what they had going on. I had the slightest bit of investment in Nona. She's the main character, and by this point, she has started to growing on me slowly over time. But this is the first time that I really felt something for Nona. Hot Sauce, the leader of the kids, saw Nona get shot, thinking that she was dead, only to see her very much alive a few minutes later. Nona tries to lie her way out of this, but she was basically born yesterday, and she is not capable of doing so. And Hot Sauce realizes what's happened, or what is happening. She realizes what Nona could be. And they have been taught to hate necromancers, or zombies, as they have been labeled. And it's not the fact that Hot Sauce literally shoots Nona in the head that hurts, or like that is the thing that makes me feel something, although it's certainly quite the response. It's what's said immediately before. You're out of the gang. This poor goddamn girl has no clue what the hell is going on pretty much at any moment, and she was betrayed by her own body. Nona, she might be a born yesterday naive child who bites eraser chunks because she likes the texture, but she is my born again yesterday naive child who bites eraser chunks because she likes the texture. And I can feel the weight of this statement hitting Nona like a brick to the face. Day 5 hits. At this point, I know we're running out of book. I know more things got to happen, and I feel like they got to happen all at once. But I don't want this video to just be me explaining everything that happens at the end of the book, because I still only vaguely understand what happened at the end of this book, or at least day 5. And if you're this far into the video, I'm guessing you have read the book. I mean, it's definitely the most fun part of the book by a mile. But the whole time I was listening, I was just like, damn, man, this shit must hit so hard for people who aren't complete idiots like me, because I don't know what's happening. I'm sorry that I keep saying it. I'm sorry. But like, I didn't know. I just didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what was happening, man. Like, for example, I had to ask my wife why Ianthe wants the 6th house so badly. I realized that Camillades is from the 6th house. Apparently, the whole house has defected. I know I didn't hear about that in book 1 or 2, which meant I probably missed something towards the beginning of book 3, which has always been my fear about reading. I zoned out for a sec, or I forgot some small detail that I thought at the time wasn't a big deal, which actually turned out to be a huge deal, and now I feel like a damn idiot. Why does We Suffer want Gideon other than a general disruption of plans? Right? Gideon is God's offspring. We learned that you need God to open the locked tomb. Okay, I can put 2 and 2 together. Are they opening the locked tomb because it's going to make God mad? That's kind of BOE's shtick, I suppose. So it makes sense. I guessed it back in book 2. Anyway, the plan is to now dress up Nona as Harrow-like as possible, get the hell in there, and find out what's going on. That's kind of what happens. I had so much fun listening to this part of the book for multiple reasons. Number 1, obviously the voice work. But number 2, plans were in motion, and it was easy to follow the things that were happening. No more room for mysterious, like, is this important? Is it not that important? Type moments. It's all important. We're running out of book, people. It's all important. The giant blue light in the sky that I mentioned earlier, that's RB number 7. Resurrection Beast, number 7. Never would have guessed that in the slightest. I'm going to be honest with you. It's still alive. It literally just walked away at the end of book 2. I think it's revealed at some point what the thing is in the actual book. I did not figure that out. I had to rely on Danielle for that one. And then, my queen, Ianthe. She is featured in full force in the Heist to Steal Gideon section. I don't even know whose side I'm on at this point. All I know is that I live to listen to Ianthe talk, and she is about to yap. Found out why the 6th house rebelled. Cassiopeia the First told them to. Who the hell is that? Heard the name a couple of times in the 2nd book. 100%, I'm going to have to go back and find the parts about her, because as I mentioned, there was a lot of talk that I didn't realize would be super important that turned out to be super important. Part of me was dreading the fact that I would pretty much have to re-listen to all the books again to try to glean some more information, but I think that was because I was so close to done with a 3rd book and like writing this video. In reality, I literally never want to leave this universe. The hunt is on for Gideon, or rather her body, and they spend this whole chapter looking for it, a big section. And just when the chapter is about to close, another moment I've been waiting for this whole freaking book, 15 hours of listening, it happens. Gideon is found. And I don't want to say alive, because at this point, I don't know what constitutes dead or alive anymore. She is some kind of revenant creature thing with like a bunch of holes in her. And the only way I'm going to be more happy is if Gideon and Ianthe have any kind of a conversation, because the banter is going to go crazy. We learned about what and who Gideon actually is, some sort of construct of the Emperor. Now she is. She's also been given that new name. I'm gonna keep calling her Gideon. And initially, after listening to a lot of the initial conversations, I kind of got worried. I got like really worried. I was like, oh no, is she like an asshole now? Am I maybe just like not used to hearing her in a while and she's always been like this? Like she was totally Gideon, but like it felt way more smug, like too smug. But there's like a hint given that maybe she's just kind of like acting up. She's putting on a show because she's actually like super sad, which would kind of make sense. That being said, this is like the most we're going to hear from Gideon for the remainder of the book, save for maybe the final chapter. We learn where the 6th House Committee is. They're in a truck. It's just been driving around the city the whole damn time. The damn convoy from like day 2 or day 1, very early on. The one redemption the first 2 days of the book had. All that setup, which I did not discuss at all, I know. One of the kids knows where it is, and for the first time, all right, maybe not the first time, but like the first time in a while, I enjoy the conversation between Born in the Morning, one of the several kids, and Nona, with Hot Sauce being there too. Nona gets the intel, but also gets a little bit of forgiveness from Hot Sauce. And what a surprise. She asks her why she's called Hot Sauce, and she's called Hot Sauce because she freaking likes hot sauce. Saw that one coming. I haven't really talked about the other side of the book, the stuff with God and Harrow, because it's, again, been relatively easy to follow. The trillionaire situation is crazy. I get it. And this big reveal might have been more impactful had my wife not told me about it a few years ago, like I mentioned at the beginning. For some reason, of all the things that she told me about these books, this was the one thing that I remembered. I tried to remember other things so that way when she like talked at me about the books, I could say something back to her. This, for some reason, was the only thing that really stuck. John got so powerful because he killed everyone. Well, I mean, he set off a nuke that triggered everyone else to launch their nukes, and like all the energy released from everyone dying, like 10 billion people, it just juiced the hell out of him after slowly gaining necromantic powers over the course of the book. It doesn't hit as hard when I know it's coming, but I really don't know how I would have reacted to this information in the moment, but I'm not going to try to hypothesize because I already knew it, so it hits a little different. So the nuke goes off and everybody's dying, all that kind of stuff. But he talks about trying to figure out the soul of a human, figuring out like where it all fits in with his new powers and all that kind of stuff. And he keeps talking about how he's hurting Harrow and the soul is like so small, but then he turns the soul of like, I guess the planet into like a person that apparently looks like a Barbie doll, but this person isn't Harrow and it's not the nun from that side of the story. If you know, you know. And without my wife giving me another hint, I don't know if I ever would have figured this out. I cannot tell you how discouraged I am at this point. I feel like I will never understand what is actually happening without someone just saying things to me directly. I think it's also around here that I confirm my suspicions that Blood of Eden is the faction that formed from the trillionaires who managed to escape Earth all those years ago. More on this later. Kicking back to the main story, and I get some small understanding wins here. The plan is to take the river to escape, which usually requires a lictor. They don't have any lictors. So as a desperation move, Camilla and Palamedes hit the fusion dance so that they can cross the river? Okay, nice. Wait. Well, okay, hang on. Yeah, I'm also being told it's because Camilla is dying and Palamedes is about to get evicted from Nibirius' body from a scene from earlier. So it's really their only option to not die completely. And now they go by Paul. I will call you what you prefer. Paul is what you picked? You're gonna lock in Paul, okay? I mean, God is named John, although that makes sense given his backstory. And everyone else has like a pretty unique name. So like maybe that's important later. I don't know. John and like Paul is like there's God stuff that I'm not a religious man. I don't freaking know. The conversation they share the moment before the fusion is very, very nice in the same way that they had a previous moment a few chapters earlier, as I tell myself to be more vulnerable and open and emotional to embrace this moment. And that didn't work because I was too confused as to what was happening. We Suffer doesn't go with them into the river, but like Pash and the Angel do. Are they not all on like the same team here? Like We Suffer lets them go because they all have the ultimate goal of opening the locked tomb? Okay, cool. I at least I got that. And then they get the hell out of there. So then I learn that the river is not in space. It's not actually in space. It's some magic stuff because they're in like a mega truck, as it's called, which is that's a truck. That's not a spaceship. So, okay, had to get that cleared up too. Nona is somehow able to pilot them to the ninth house. She was just going to give up and die and kill everyone in the process, but then was reminded that Noodle, the dog that's been in the book the whole time, was in the back seat. And she was like, oh shit, Noodle, I forgot. And then decides to live, which I found pretty funny and very on brand for Nona. The only reason this story continues was because of a dog. And Nona likes the doggy. My worst nightmare is about to begin though. The book is talking about old lictors again. I don't remember shit from the second book while in the middle of reading that book. I am fucked. But here's what's up. What a voice for sore ears. Crux, you miserable old bastard. Never thought I'd hear your ass again. And I Glamine, now promoted. It's great to hear you as well. Some bad shit's going on in the ninth house, which I don't think I even have time to get to. They barely get to it in the book. They gotta get to the locked tomb. Ianthe shows up too. Somehow she's there fucking Palpatine third trilogy Star Wars style, but okay, it's not completely out of pocket for her. She's very powerful. And they make their way to the locked tomb. I'm also ignoring a bunch of the other stuff happening right now. Dreerbur is being like invaded by some sort of creature or a thing, but I'm not really sure of its relevance right now. It might be relevant later, and I'll get to that. The locked tomb contains the body of Alecto, who we learned is God's cavalier from a long time ago. Gideon says God wants her to kill Alecto. Ianthe said God needs Alecto to be alive for him to be alive. So why would he have her killed? And now I'm in some Blueprints parlor puzzle. Like, okay, Ianthe's statement is true, and we know that because my wife told me, but we don't know if what Gideon's saying is true, but it could be true, so I'm going to open the white box. But they get in there. They get into the locked tomb. Nona, who, by the way, still don't really know who Nona is or how she came to be in the first place, collapses on top of Alecto, waking her and Harrow, because Harrow was there from the end of the second book, like her spirit, she was like anchored there, right? And Alecto is hella confused and finds John God and stabs him in the stomach. And then God says, morning. And it's over. And that's it. So, okay. You mean to tell me that this entire series, this whole story, it's not the adventures of Gideon and Harrow. It's not the adventures of fighting the resurrection beasts. It's the story of a guy who, somewhat justifiably, got pissed at some trillionaires 10,000 years ago abandoning the planet due to apocalyptic events instead of helping more people out escape the planet, and is still holding that grudge. That's what's happening here? At the end of all this, 3 books deep, the story is man holds 10,000 year grudge. Also, you mean to tell me that after all this, it's not even over? You mean to tell me there's a 4th book coming? I was led to believe that this was a three book thing. I learned halfway through the 2nd book that there's supposed to be a 4th book. Why did I start this shit now? I should have waited until all the books were out, man. I enjoyed Gideon the Ninth immensely. As I was reviewing my script, I am done with my 2nd listen, and I think of it as my true first listening of the book. I enjoyed it so much that I mentally suffered when it was over. On my first read, I enjoyed Harrow the Ninth, if anything, for some of the banter and the still very space and necromancer themed stuff throughout. Like, it still had that flavor. But the wheels fell off the wagon as soon as I realized that some stuff I didn't end up paying as much attention to actually ended up being incredibly important. And Nona took a little while for me to get going as well. At the end of the day, though, I feel like this experience was kind of wasted on me because in the moment, I did not feel smart enough to understand enough things. I need direction. When things are directionless, when I don't have a hook to latch onto, it is very difficult for me to stay engaged or like understand things. Gideon had directions and plot lines to attach to. Gideon's escaping, then we're going to Canaan House, then we're solving puzzles, then we're solving the murder. I knew to lock in on certain things because like that was the little subplot that was happening. Harrow was a bit more ambiguous, like kill the resurrection beast and kill the sleeper, but at least it was still in the world that I liked. But then, like, we don't even kill the beast. Like, we take a hard left into something completely different that doesn't hit as hard because I don't understand what it means in the moment. And then Nona felt like it had almost no direction for like 40% of the book. Take it all with a grain of salt, man. This is the first book series I read in my whole life. Harrow and Nona were really fucking difficult for me. And my wife ended up telling me that she only wanted me to read the first book because the next 2 were so difficult. And I don't have the experience nor the brain synapses to get more out of this experience. I wanted to be more immersed with them, but I was so not confident in my ability to understand what was going on that I spent a lot of the time just being like, am I supposed to know something here? Was I supposed to know something here? Instead of just enjoying the damn book, man. I had to question everything. Not knowing or understanding stuff didn't trigger the response my wife gets when she doesn't understand something. I view it as a failure to comprehend. She views it as an opportunity to learn more. She also has way more experience reading, so she knows the ins and outs a little bit more, like, oh, this information makes no goddamn sense right now. So it'll probably be important later if I pay attention to do. If I were fed similar information, which I was a lot, it wouldn't make sense to me. And instead of stowing it away, I would just be confused and annoyed, thinking I missed something that would make it all make sense. I felt discouraged at my ability to comprehend even some stuff in the first book. Although fortunately I picked up a lot more of the key information since any of the drama usually ended in someone just dying, right? The problem is that it took me like 3 to 4 weeks to listen to an entire book. So a reread is a month-long process for me, whereas a reread for my wife could be a day. Like she could just crank out a whole book in a day. Despite that, I'm really listening to the books. I really like this universe. I really like the setting, but I wasn't ready for how it was going to be delivered to me. And I wasn't prepared to go from this D&D party meeting in a tavern to deal with some local thieves to go kill God, literally and figuratively. I came in wanting Gideon and Harrow adventures. That's not what I got. But that doesn't mean the books are bad or anything. Like, I'm definitely not a judge of what a good or bad book is. Not in the slightest. But I can evaluate my own enjoyment. And what I'll say there is I wish I had more brain power, more emotional bandwidth, and my wife's curiosity. That being said, as someone who is intimately familiar with doing the same kinds of videos over and over and over again, I also understand that the author likely didn't want to just rewrite the same book. I loved Gideon. I loved it, but it's very possible that Tamsyn wanted to create very distinct experiences for each book, and they are indeed distinct. Maybe that continued Gideon Harrow banter wouldn't have worked as well in the next book. You know, maybe she gave everything she had in that department, or maybe she just knew from the start what the whole storyline was going to be, and that was that. Whenever that fourth book comes out, I will totally make a follow-up video to this, assuming I have the time to do so. I have already had so many things explained to me by my wife. I will have re-listened to every book again, maybe even a third time. So yeah, there's going to be a follow-up. Does this make me want to continue reading or listening to books in general? Or do I just like listening to a nice British lady talk to me? I think that depends. What has Muir also narrated? I don't know if it's bad for him to ask for narrators over the actual substance of the book, or like, the writers themselves. But I can't give enough praise to her for helping me get through these books. Although without Tamsyn writing the damn books in the first place, there would be nothing for her to read. So, thank you both, because this was a really, really fun experience, and I'm glad I got to participate in it. Also, if you're watching this, Tamsyn, if you ever get a live-action version rolling, please let me audition for Calamities. Please. I don't care if I'm 15 years too old. Please. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope this video was fun. I know it's, way outside my usual content that I do, and this is truly, one of the biggest, love of the game videos that I've ever made, so I just had a lot of fun trying new things recently, so I hope you enjoyed, whether you know me or you're just popping in for a second because you like the books. So I appreciate you making it all the way to the end. But I'm sweaty as hell, and it's 2:30 in the morning, and I want to get this stuff off me now. So take care.
My penumbral lady.
Sorted.
I'll put it back up. Yeah, Harrow. Yeah!